Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Ron's Amazing Stories, where we play tales to take you away from today. On the program today, we have a lot to get to. A friendly house ghost, Bigfoot talks, and the shadow hunts down a walking corpse. We end the show with a shadow edition of
Johnny, is this true?
And it all begins with this special edition of the 2.5 Minute Mystery.
And now, a new 2.5 Minute Mystery.
This 2.5 Minute Mystery is being brought to you by Keith Clark from Temecula, California, best known for its lush and championship golf courses. Thank you, Keith. Our story opens at the Smith Mansion on a quiet Sunday evening. George Smith is having a brandy in his study when the door opens. "What are you doing here? You don't belong here, and I won't stand for it."
Freeze! This is the police. Don't move.
Oh, good. Detective Peters, you're here. We have a fatal gunshot victim in the study. There were 5 total people in the house. The wife, his personal cook, the butler, a housemaid, and his son Robert.
Very good, Officer Reynolds. Bring them in to me, one at a time.
Yes, sir.
After questioning the 5, Detective Peters learned what each had been doing that evening. Mrs. Smith said that she was reading a book in the library. The cook was in the kitchen making breakfast when he heard the shot. The butler was giving instructions to the housemaid in the living room, and Mr. Smith's son was walking the dog and didn't hear the shot. After reviewing all of the alibis, Detective Peters quickly arrested the murderer. But who was the killer, and how did the good detective find the criminal?
In just a minute, we'll have our solution. But first, a message from our sponsor.
Do you enjoy these 2.5 Minute Mysteries? Please let me know. Also, if you have one to share, I'd love to hear it. Go to ronsamazingstories.com and click on the Contact tab. And now, here is our solution. Did you figure it out? When you break it down, the answer is quite simple, really. Why would the cook be making breakfast on a quiet Sunday evening? This 2.5 Minute Mystery was brought to you by Keith Clark from Temecula, California. Keith is the second person to send in a detective mystery to the show. Thank you, Keith.
What's that you said?
I received this email from Jeff Owen from Parts Unknown. He posted it to the blog site. "Ron, I'm very sorry you had to spend time in the hospital, but I'm glad you're back and wish you a speedy recovery. Thanks for all you do. I love your podcast. Jeff." I've received quite a few get well cards, notes, emails, even a loaf of bread from folks, and I can't thank everyone enough for it. People like Sylvia, Rich, Matt Cares 777, Mark, Tony, and Michelle have all made this past week bearable, knowing that I'm not alone in this. My home church chimed in with help above and beyond anything I could imagine. thank you, Pastor Ted and Good Shepherd Lutheran Church. I also need to thank my family for calling every single day to cheer me up and to tell me that everything was going to be okay. So thank you, Mom, Jim, Joanne, and Bobby. I think last week was one of the toughest that I've faced in a very long time. I did have my follow-up appointment with my doctor yesterday, and for the most part, the news was all good. We have a solid plan for recovery, and I'm already feeling so much better. So there, you have an update on me. I received another email this week from Elizabeth Butler, who lives in the city of New York. Before I read it, I do want to say how proud I am of the people of New York and surrounding areas. You have stayed strong in what amounts to be apocalyptic conditions. Thank you to all of you. You are inspirational. Now, Elizabeth writes, Ron, thank you for your show. I've been locked down more days than I can count in my tiny one-room apartment in Hell's Kitchen. Just saying that sounds frightening, but the truth is we've come together as a community to make the most of this bad situation. One thing that has been my savior are the podcasts. Your voice, thoughts, and stories have taken me away from today, and I thank you for it. Also, I'm very glad that you have 400 episodes because it looks like I'm going to need every single one of them. Lizzie. Well, Lizzie, thank you for that, and that I could be of any help to anyone is all I hope to do. I have found comfort in the podcasts myself. They have a unique way of shutting off the problems, if just for a little while. I don't think that it's an accident that podcasts have been so very well established and ready for us to face this pandemic. Without this tech, our Zoom calls, FaceTime calls, and yes, even that old standby Skype would have never been invented. To Liz and the people of New York, I say, my thoughts and prayers are yours. And now, here's a story from Audible. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. They have over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, computer, Kindle. Whatever you have, you can listen to Audible on it. So what am I listening to right now? Break Shot, My First 21 Years by James Taylor. This is an incredible journey of the man, his life, and what made his music his music. Recorded in his home studio, The Barn, in Western Massachusetts, Taylor tells the deeply personal story of his youth, which is entwined with the story of his family. Here is the opening of a truly amazing story.
I'm James Taylor, and I'm a professional autobiographer. I usually talk about myself with a guitar in my hand, and actually, I have one here in case I need it. For the next 90 minutes or so, I'm going to take you on a tour of my early life, the source of many of my songs, what happened to me before anybody knew my name. I'm in the barn of my property in the Berkshires in Western Massachusetts. My wife Kim is up in the house. Our twin sons Rufus and Henry are back at high school in Boston for their senior year. The place has quieted down a little. There's a fire in the wood stove. Autumn is in the air. It's a natural time to reminisce. Perhaps art happens when the usual channels are not available and we have to find a new path forward. Sometimes in describing that new pathway, we open a door that is useful to other people too. My story is entwined with the story of my family, The Taylors have enjoyed many blessings and a good deal of real pain. My parents are gone, so I feel I can talk about them openly. My older brother Alex, too. My sister Kate and my brothers Livingston and Hugh, on the other hand, are still with us and going strong. So I'm going to do my best to leave them out of this recollection. They have their own versions of what happened to us and their own stories to tell. I have made a living of putting my business in the street. That may be good or bad. I suppose I am telling this story mostly to myself. Thank God it's not compulsory listening. You can tune me out at any time. I took a walk in the woods the other day and tried to think of a title for this recollection. I thought maybe Break Shot, the opening of a game of pool when you slam the cue ball into the 15 other balls and they all go flying off. Growing up, my family had every advantage. We were white and privileged. My father was president of his class at Harvard Medical 4 years in a row, a prominent professor, dean of the University of North Carolina Medical School. My mother was from Massachusetts. Her father was a fisherman. She went to finishing school, studied voice at the New England Conservatory of Music. She did everything well. She designed our house. She painted. She raised sheep and wove her own cloth. She designed and planted beautiful gardens. We grew up in North Carolina taking classical music lessons, going to concerts by André Segovia and Pablo Casals. We traveled to Europe by steamship and vacationed in the Caribbean. As a kid, I acted in a small theater group. Every summer we drove up to Martha's Vineyard and spent idyllic weeks by the seashore. That's where we learned to sail. We took regular train trips to New York to see the theater and visit museums. By the time I was 15, I could speak French, and I had 4 years of cello under my belt. I spent one summer at an Audubon camp where we studied natural science. At 16, I went on an international friends trip to the Soviet Union. We were given a lot. But somehow in the 60s, our family fell apart. 3 of us kids ended up in psychiatric hospitals, and a 4th should have. Drug and alcohol addiction tore us up. You could make a case that most of the songs I have written have been a way of trying to work out just what happened to us. It's like that movie Groundhog Day. I am assigned to keep going through it over and over until I figure it out, until I get it right. They say the child is father to the man. The child in this man has been father to a lot of music.
Them that's got shall get, them that's not shall lose.
Now, I cannot recommend this one enough. It is beautiful in its simplicity. James Taylor tells us his story using his words and his music to do it. I know that for a limited time the production was free to all. I don't know if that is the case today, but I do know that you can have his audiobook, Break Shot, My First 21 Years, for free today. Here is what Audible has set up for us. Audible is offering a free audiobook and 30 days to give you the opportunity to check out their service. To download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. Again, that's audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories, and you can get James Taylor for free today. Thank you, Audible.
These are your stories, sent by you for you.
This story comes from Owensboro in Kentucky. It was sent in to the main website by Isaac Mullins. I am an appliance service technician. I go to a lot of houses. One day I arrive at my call. It's an old Victorian house that's obviously been lovingly restored. As I grab my gear, I start having the feeling that someone is watching me through the windows. I quickly turned around, but nothing was there. Quiet as quiet can be. I walked to the door and knocked on it. It opens, and a pleasant older lady with a pile of white hair and a warm smile greets me. I step into the foyer, and as I'm introducing myself, I feel like I've stepped down 3 inches. Now I need to explain this. You see, this is how I always feel when I'm in the presence of spirit energy. I feel smaller somehow and blasted with love and kindness. I feel like I'm being embraced. I stopped the homeowner and asked, "Just how many spirits live here?" She smiled, and with a pleasant older lady laugh, she said, "Sweetie, I don't know. I've lost count." I told her that this is a beautiful house and it knows that it's well loved. She smiled and told me that that's the spirit that I felt. Emily was her name, and she was the original owner of the place. During her lifetime, she took in boarders, orphans, and the homeless. She loves people, but loves visitors more. As we walked through the house and into the kitchen, she told me all about Emily and her extended family. Finally, we got to business, and we talked about her old stove that I was to work on. As I get to work, she says, walking out of the door, "If the kids bother you, just tell them to shoo." I didn't think much of it, thinking maybe she had grand or maybe great-grandkids around, although I didn't hear any children playing. I get to work, and I'm leaning into her oven when I hear a metal clink like a tool in my bag is being moved. I leaned back out of the oven and reached for my bag on my right side. It's gone. I turned to my left side, and there's my bag, and even crazier, every tool is out of the bag and on the floor. Then I heard what sounded like laughter and running on the ceiling above me. I smiled and said out loud, "Very funny, but I'm working, so you two get outside and play." To this day, I don't know why I said you two. I started picking up my tools and happened to glance straight into the oven. I saw what looked like 2 orbs floating up and out of the oven. They moved straight towards my face. I lifted my hands up to block them, and they flew up and over my head. And then I heard children laughing again. I finished up my work with no other interruptions. I told the homeowner about the kids and said my goodbyes. She laughed and promised to scold them. As I climbed into my van, I looked towards the house and could see the rope swing in the backyard moving back and forth. It was a calm and sunny day with no wind anywhere. I smiled and had the overwhelming urge to go play in the backyard. I didn't. Isaac Mullins, Owensboro, Kentucky. I love this story. I think it's my favorite kind of ghost story, one that is happy or funny. It gives me hope that the other side has to be a better and fun place to be. Thank you, Isaac, for sharing this with us. It truly is amazing. This story comes from Martin Hillcrest, who lives in New England. It's another of my favorite types of stories, a true Bigfoot tale that Martin has titled The Night That Bigfoot Spoke. We were camping out in an area south of Mount Rainier, just outside the park boundary, off a road that would lead you to a log gate that enters the park. We set up our camp in a flat area that would fit our 4 tents. Once camp was set, we hung out with our friends while the kids played and then had dinner around the fire. Just friends hanging out, having drinks, hanging around the fire, and all was great. We stayed up pretty late. Slowly, everyone faded off to their tents and to bed. My wife was cold and went down to warm up in the car and then proceeded to fall asleep. Now my daughter and I are the last to awake by the fire, and then she decided she wanted to sleep in the car where it was warm. I agreed that that was okay. I attempted to wake my wife up and get her to come with me to the tent, but she was out cold. So I went to the tent, grabbed her a blanket, and turned off the car. I stayed up a little bit longer by the fire and must have dozed off momentarily because when I woke back up, I was sitting in a camping chair by only glowing embers, and it was pitch black all around me. I got up, found my way to the tent, and fell fast asleep as soon as I got into my sleeping bag. Around 3:30 a.m., I woke to a tent kind of rustling and what sounded like two female voices talking really softly. I listened intently, trying to hear what they were saying, but I really couldn't understand anything. Then silence. I figured it was my wife and daughter finding their way to my daughter's tent, not wanting to wake me up by being loud. I thought my wife was probably just going to sleep in the tent with my daughter. However, now I'm wide awake because my back is killing me. My damn air mattress went flat. As I lay there in what I can only describe as dead silence, I hear cracking like sticks breaking or popping. I assume it's the fire still hanging on somehow. But then I hear something moving around towards the front of my tent, and it stops. Something is directly outside the front of my tent, and I can feel it and sense it. So I slowly rise up to a seated position and hear something breathe in and exhale a large breath. It was followed by what only I can describe as a very loud huff, as if from a horse or cow or some very large animal. I sat frozen with fear, trying to rationalize what it was I'm hearing, and then everything went silent. Finally, a hoot owl sounds a little way off from behind the area where our friend's tent was, and after that I heard nothing else. I stayed there, sitting up, frozen with fear for what seemed like forever, or at least until the sun came up. I mustered up the courage and went outside. That's when I noticed my daughter's tent was unzipped and empty. I panicked. I rushed to the car, but there they were in the car, sound asleep. Now I'm freaking out. Who did I hear the night before? Who was that skulking around my tent? And what the heck was that breathing in front of me outside my tent? This all happened Friday into Saturday morning, and we still had another night there. I decided right then and there I'm not sleeping in the tent that night, and neither are my wife and daughter. The rest of the day goes great. Hanging out, having breakfast, going to town. Later, we went for a hike down the road to the lake, basically just camping and hanging. When we got back to camp, my buddy began working on dinner for all of us. We sat there and began to hear these blood-curdling screams and howls. We all stopped talking and fell silent, and we began to ask each other, what the heck was this? We heard this about 4 or 5 times. It sounded like a woman being murdered, and the howls, well, they were like nothing I've ever heard before. Then came a few tree knocks from the same general direction. I thought, someone's got to be messing with us out here. Keep in mind, it was a holiday weekend, so tons of campers within a 15-mile radius. So I called my buddy over. We decide that we're going to answer those tree knocks. That's when we heard it. I got a chill down my spine to my core, and the hairs on my arms and neck raised. We both looked at each other and at the same time asked, "Did you hear that?" Something was talking in a deep, guttural, legit-sounding language that was completely unintelligible. It was behind us in the woods, maybe only 10 feet away. Needless to say, we put down our sticks, losing any idea of hitting anything. After about an hour, the screams and chants stopped. We were left only to freak the heck out and agreed that nobody was sleeping in their tents that night. The next morning, we packed up and had breakfast in town. Ron, I'm 39 years old from the East Coast. I've been shot at, chased, beat up growing up in the ghetto. I am a former U.S. Army infantryman who has spent countless nights only in a sleeping bag in a foxhole. I am now afraid to ever sleep in a tent again after that weekend. Martin Hillcrest, New England. I have camped at Mount Rainier many times during my lifetime. It's usually a quiet and serene experience. I have heard Bigfoot stories from that area before, but nothing like what you encountered. Truly incredible. Thank you for sharing your story with us, Martin. Our featured story comes from the classic old-time radio series, The Shadow. Now, I love these episodes, and the one we have today is a lesson in exceptional storytelling. I will warn you ahead of time that the quality of the recording isn't great, but I hope that you can hear through it and enjoy it. We all know that murder is wrong, but what if you bring back the dead to do the job for you? This is the premise of this one, and it is titled The Walking Corpse. It first aired on April 24th, 1946.
Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? The shadow knows. The shadow who aids the forces of law and order is in reality Lamont Cranston, wealthy young man about town. Years ago in the Orient, Cranston learned a strange and mysterious secret, the hypnotic power to cloud men's minds so they cannot see him. Cranston's friend and companion, the lovely Margot Lane, is the only person who knows to whom the voice of the invisible shadow belongs. Today's drama, The Walking Corpse. You are finally awake. What's happened? You've been asleep. In a very deep sleep for quite some time. Where am I? I don't remember this place. That is quite natural. You have been through a very strange experience. Yes. Very strange. I don't understand. I don't even know who I am. You don't? And you don't remember what you have done? I can't remember anything. Then look in that long mirror over there. Look at your shaved head, the burns on your wrists and ankles, your slit trouser legs. Now do you know who you are? No, it can't be. I couldn't have come back. Do you doubt your own eyes? Do you? No, I guess not. Very well, then. Now, hold out your hand. Good. See, they're strong hands. Very strong hands. Strong hands. Strong hands. Strong hands. Oh, you fool. Put your hands down. You almost choked me. I couldn't help it. Suddenly I wanted to... Of course. Perfectly natural. You felt the urge to strangle someone. Perfectly natural. Considering who you are and what you have done.
this is Helen Borelli. She's one of the girls I advised down at the settlement house, and I told her you might be able to help her.
I'll be glad to do whatever I can, Margot. Well, tell me, Miss Burley, how long has your brother been missing?
He hasn't been home for a couple of weeks or more. I'm awfully worried, Mr. Cranston.
Have you reported your brother's disappearance to the police, Miss Burley?
No. Joe's always been kind of afraid of the police. Do you have any idea why, Helen? No, unless it had something to do with the cult.
Your brother was a member of a cult?
Yes, but I never found out exactly what it was.
I see. Perhaps there's some friend of your brother's who might have an idea where he is.
The only friend of his that I know of is a man named Lopez. He runs a curio shop down on Center Street. I've been to see him a half a dozen times, but every time he just gets sore and tells me to mind my own business.
Were your brother and this Lopez on good terms?
All I know is they spent a lot of time together. I think they were in a business of some kind. If anybody knows where Joe is, it would be Lopez.
I see. I think it would be best if you reported your brother's disappearance to the police, Miss Borelli. In the meantime, Miss Lane and I will go down to Lopez's shop and see what we can find out about your brother.
Let us see how the little music box works, Toby. And they start to play perfectly now. Lopez will get a fine price for this one, eh, Toby? Perhaps people will wonder how a poor little shopkeeper like Lopez could get such a precious little curio. But what they don't know won't hurt them, eh, Toby? Customer. What is the matter, Toby? It is only a customer in the front of the shop. Toby, why do you watch your back so? Quiet, quiet, Toby. He's coming back. I am sorry, sir. I was coming right out. Who are you? What are you? Don't come any closer, don't. I called for help, but...
Well, here we are, Margot. Lopez's shop.
Oh, Lamont, look at those old statuettes he has in the window.
That's queer looking, aren't they?
Yes, but...
Now, let's go in.
All right. Well, nobody seems to be around.
Well, maybe he's in the back.
Mr. Lopez certainly has an unusual assortment of gadgets. Oh, look at these strange little figures on that shelf.
They look like native charms.
You mean the kind that ward off evil spells?
Probably. Well, I wonder what this Lopez is. Looks like a back room behind those curtains there. I'll see if he's back there. Lopez! Lopez!
Lamont, you should see this little clock here. It's the most exquisite.
Stop.
What is it?
Don't come back here, darling.
What's happened? Lamont, what is it?
The man back there, Margot, he's been strangled to death.
Oh. Do you think it's Helen's brother?
No, Margot, not from the description she gave of him.
Lopez?
I'm afraid so.
What's that you're holding?
Something I saw lying near the body.
Looks like a small glove. Little piece of black cloth cut out in the shape of a hand.
Something sewed up inside it. I wonder if... I'll slit it open with my penknife. There, emptied on this counter.
Why, it's a tiny piece of bone. And some dust.
Now, this is getting very interesting, Margot.
What does it mean, Lamont?
Unless I'm very much mistaken, this little symbol is voodoo.
Voodoo?
Yes. The black hand is the voodoo calling card of death in the black magic cult of Haiti.
And Helen Borelli said her brother belonged to a cult?
Yes. And if the cult Borelli belonged to was voodoo, I think I know someone who can give us information about him.
Who?
Mama Segreto.
Who's she?
An old native woman from the West Indies.
Oh, darling, you know the strangest people.
She's helped me out before, put me on the track of several underworld characters. We're going to phone the police, Margot, and report Lopez murder. Then I think we'd better drop in on Mama Secreto.
Still, feathered one, be still. You must forgive my pet bird, Mr. Cranston. He still thinks he is on the island.
Mama Secreto, we've come for some information.
Oh, what do you wish to know?
We're looking for a man named Borelli.
Borelli is no longer one of us. Do not seek him here.
Then he was a member of the voodoo cult.
Yes. Yes, he was, but he is no longer one of us.
Do you know where Borelli is now, Mama Secreto?
No. The man Borelli is evil. We do not allow criminals among our people.
How do you know he's a criminal, Mama Secreto?
This has come to my knowledge.
A man by the name of Lopez was strangled this morning.
Lopez?
Yes. You know him?
No. No, I do not know him.
This little black hand was found near his body. You recognize it?
It is voodoo.
Lopez had many native curios in his shop. Perhaps Lopez stole them from a native burial ground. Perhaps the cult appointed Joe Borelli to avenge the wrong, and perhaps you're hiding Joe Borelli in this house right now, Mama Secreto.
No, the man Borelli is a lawbreaker, a criminal. I know nothing about Borelli. Nothing. Darling, don't you think you were a little rough on Mama Secreto?
Well, we did find out that Borelli was a member of a voodoo cult.
Yes, and if we're to believe her, Borelli was not only out of favor with the cult, but had crossed the law some way.
Exactly. Maybe that the cult business is just a dodge to hide the real killer.
How do you mean?
Well, Mama Secreto was obviously afraid of Borelli, not for what he'd done in the cult, but because he's a criminal. Perhaps a murderer. Before we do anything else, Margot, I think we'd better get down to headquarters and check on his police record.
Hello, Lamont. Margot.
Hello, Mr. Weston.
Well, I suppose you two want to get the latest dope on that Lopez murder you reported.
Yes, Commissioner. Anything new turn up?
Well, we've got a dragnet out for Borelli, but we're not going to have to wait for the boys to bring him in to find out who the killer is.
You know who the killer is now, Commissioner?
We will in a few minutes. We found the killer's fingerprints all over Lopez's collar. As soon as we confirm the analysis of the prints, we'll have our man.
You think they're Borelli's fingerprints?
Maybe. Lopez and Borelli were mixed up in some hot goods rackets together. They've both got records.
So Borelli does have a police record.
Yeah, sure. But this Lopez probably had plenty of other enemies, Margot.
Yes, he might have had a lot of enemies. Commissioner, did you know that there was a West Indian voodoo cult in this city?
Voodoo cult?
That Lopez was mixed up in it in some way?
Now, wait a second, Cranston. You're not going to sit there and tell me that this murder had something to do with a voodoo cult.
Commissioner, about those prints in the Lopez case.
Oh, what about them?
I've checked and rechecked them, and they don't make sense.
What are you talking about?
Those fingerprints we found of Lopez belong to Peter Dorn.
Peter Dorn? Not the same
Yes,
one.
Commissioner, the same one. They're the prints of Peter Dorn, the killer who was electrocuted at the penitentiary last month. On the trail of the weird voodoo murder, Margot and Lamont are abruptly halted in their chase when they discover that the fingerprints of the killer are those of Peter Dorn, a convicted murderer who was electrocuted in the penitentiary over a month ago.
And you say Commissioner Weston checked on Dorn's body before you left headquarters, Lamont?
Yes. Found that after Dorn's electrocution, his body had been claimed by his next of kin, his older brother.
And now they can't find any trace of Dorn's brother?
Apparently disappeared off the face of the earth.
Oh, it's preposterous, darling. A man strangled to death by an electrocuted convict.
The fantastic part of it, Margot. Strangulation was Peter Dorn's specialty. He had a strange mania of whistling a little tune before he choked his victims to death.
I remember his pictures in the papers. It was horrible. Those eyes, that thin white face.
One of the strongest of the voodoo's beliefs is in the zombie. The walking dead.
Oh, darling, there must be some rational explanation for this thing. Well, there's got to be.
I wonder. Margot, I think it's time the Shadow took a hand in this voodoo mystery. Trail seems to lead right back to Mama Secreto. She didn't tell us much the first time. But now the Shadow is going to get the real story.
are hungry, my feathered one. Here, sit on your little perch and let me give you your dinner. There now. Is that better, my pretty one? Mama Segreto has a visitor. Just think still, my feathered. What do you think just a caller? Who is it? Why do you not answer? I'll see who walks into my house. No. It is not real. No, put your hands down. Do not touch me. Help! Sonny! Comes in. Is it the zombie again? Come back to finish your job of murder?
This is the Shadow, Mama Segreto. I'm here to help you. What has happened?
I cannot see you, but you cannot help me. I am already dying.
Marks on the throat like those on Lopez. The Shadow cannot save your life now, Mama Segreto, but he can avenge this wicked deed. Who attacked you, Mama Segreto?
Zombie, the walking dead.
The walking dead?
You are the god for the condemned. Wrist burned, trouser slit, head shaved.
Have you ever seen this man before?
Yes. In life, he was once called Peter Dawn.
Peter Dawn? Listen to me closely, Mama Segreto. What connection is there between Dawn and Joe Borelli, the member of your cult who disappeared?
None. There is no connection.
But you do know something of Borelli's disappearance, don't you?
Yes, I have lied to others, but I will tell you the truth. Borelli was here some time ago with one called Lopez. They had done evil, and the police had shot Borelli. He was badly hurt.
He died here in your house?
No. A man who called himself a doctor came and took him away.
Where can the Shadow find this doctor, Mama Segreto?
I have his name. All information. Hidden in the little face. There.
Rest in peace, Mama Segreto. The Shadow will avenge your death. Watch those porch steps, darling. They're pretty rickety.
Whole place looks as if it were about to fall apart.
This is the doctor's place, all right, according to Mama Segreto's note.
Looks like something out of pole. Shutters half off their hinges. Overgrown bushes in the yard.
Does look deserted. No lights in any of the front rooms. Margot, listen.
Yes. Somebody's walking around in there.
Sounds like it's coming from the side of the house. This porch goes around. Come on, Margot. Here we are. There's a light on in that room.
Be careful, Lamont.
Now we can see inside. Through this window.
That man standing under the light.
The man Mama Segreto described. He's turning around now.
It's Dawn, Lamont. It's Dawn. I recognize his newspaper pictures. He's alive.
Turned out the light. Margot, we've got to get into that house, and we've got to get in right now.
But we've been all over the upper part of the house, Lamont. There wasn't a sign of anyone.
I don't know how he could have gotten away. Maybe hiding in one of these rooms down here in the basement.
Oh, I bumped into something.
Wait a minute. I'll strike a match.
wooden box. Lamont, it's a coffin.
I'll raise the lid.
It's a body.
Yes. And we saw through the window.
It's Dawn. Please, Lamont, let's get out of this place.
Steady, darling. Those steps again. They're coming from the other end of the basement down there. Come on. Quiet. Coming from behind this door.
Sounds just like the ones we heard upstairs.
Yes. This door's made of steel. There's no chance of breaking in.
What does it all mean, Lamont? If that was Dawn's body in that box back there, how can they...
I'm going back and have another look at that body. What I suspect is true.
What?
There isn't time to explain now. Come on. The box was somewhere near here. Here, darling, light another match.
Lamont, you left the lid open, didn't you?
Yes. Someone's closed it.
It's gone. The body's gone.
Another match. Somebody's opened that steel door down the other end.
Lamont, I can't stand another minute of this.
I won't have to, darling. We'll look upstairs and get you safely out. I want you to phone the police. Tell Weston to get here as fast as he can.
Well, what are you going to do?
The Shadow is going to have a talk with that zombie.
Who is it? Who came in?
It's the Shadow. Joe Borelli?
I can't see you.
I'm right here with you in this laboratory, Borelli.
My name is not Borelli. I'm Dawn. Peter Dawn.
I think the doctor made you believe that, but your name is Joe Borelli. And your partner's name is Lopez. Lopez, whom the doctor made you kill before you strangled Mama Segreto.
I killed Lopez and Mama Segreto?
Yes, Borelli. Your friend, the doctor, made you continue the crimes of Peter Dawn.
But he told me I was Dawn. I didn't remember being anyone else.
You were badly hurt when you were brought here. The doctor did a great deal to you before you recovered consciousness.
But the marks of the execution, my shaved head, my face in the mirror was Dawn.
Dawn is dead, Borelli. The Shadow has seen his body. Someone's coming. It's the doctor. Act as if you're still under his influence.
All right, Shadow.
So, here you are, Dawn. How many times have I told you to stay out of my laboratory?
I'm sorry, Dr. Richards.
It is time now to go out for another walk, Dawn. There is another cult member on my list we should pay a little visit to.
No. No more. No more. Dawn. I'm not Dawn. I'm wise to your plan now. Trying to convince me that I was Dawn, making me strangle Lopez and that old woman.
So, your memory has come back.
Only now it is too late.
You are a strangler now, Borelli. You've outdone Dawn at his own game and with Dawn's own hand.
All right, then I'll put those hands where they belong, around your neck. No.
Let him go, Borelli.
Who spoke?
Someone you'll have to answer to for your crimes, Richards. The Shadow has caught up with you.
Who is speaking? I can see no one.
No one can see the Shadow. Dr. Richards, you're responsible for the murders of Lopez and Mama Segreto.
Borelli committed the crime. You haven't any proof against me.
The proof is there. Borelli's fingers on which you grafted the skin you took from Peter Dawn's fingertips.
No one will ever believe you, Shadow.
Borelli's fingers will be evidence enough to send you to the chair.
All right, then. I'll destroy the evidence. Why, you...
Borelli!
Don't try to interfere, Shadow. I've got a gun in Borelli's back. I'll kill him if you touch me. Start walking, Borelli.
Oh, no.
See this sunken tank in the middle of the roof floor? No, not that. The electric current in that tank will boil the skin right off your body, Borelli. I'm going to push you into it right now. And then there'll be no evidence.
Look out, Borelli!
Lamont, what happened down there in the laboratory after you sent me for the police?
When the doctor discovered that the Shadow had found him out, he tried to push Joe Borelli into a sunken tank that was wired with high-voltage electric current.
And then the doctor fell in himself?
Yes. The Shadow pushed Borelli out of the way. Dr. Richards' own forward motion caused him to lose his balance.
A horrible death. Who was this Dr. Richards, anyway?
The so-called Dr. Richards, Margaret, was actually Peter Dawn's older brother, the man who claimed Dawn's body immediately after the electrocution. He was a brilliant but apparently demented surgeon had his license revoked by the medical profession.
But I don't understand why Richards would want Lopez and Mama Segreto out of the way.
Revenge, Margot. Dawn was once a member of the voodoo cult. But when Mama Segreto and the other members discovered he was a killer, they tipped off the police and ultimately sent Dawn to the electric chair.
And then Richards found out that the cult had double-crossed his brother and decided to get revenge.
Exactly. The ironical part about it is the doctor used Borelli, a member of the cult, to do the killings for him.
Awful. What's going to happen to Borelli, Lamont?
I'm afraid he'll have to stand trial, Margot, but I think the jury will take into consideration that under the insidious influence of Dr. Richards, he wasn't entirely responsible for his own acts.
The weed of crime bears bitter fruit. Crime does not pay. The shadow knows.
So what'd you think of that one? One thing's for sure, that cat was quite irritating. Just about the only thing I didn't like about the story. The Shadow was a figure never seen, only heard, and was an invincible crime fighter. He possessed so many gifts which enabled him to overcome any enemy. Besides his tremendous strength, he could defy gravity, speak any language, unravel any code, and become invisible with his famous ability to cloud men's minds. Along with his team of operatives, the Shadow battled adversaries with chilling names like the Black Master, Kings of Crime, the Five Chameleons, and of course, the famous The Red Menace. Over the course of 18 years, Street and Smith published 325 issues of The Shadow, each one containing a novel about the sinister crime fighter. These stories were written by Maxwell Grant, a fictional name created by the publishing company. Although several people wrote under that name, Walter B. Gibson wrote the most, 282 in all. How about that? Our radio drama today starred Brett Morrison as the Shadow. He played the character in 1943 and then again from 1945 to 1954. He was by far the most used actor for that role. Born in Chicago, Illinois, he entered radio in the 1930s while he was still in high school. Now that truly is amazing.
Johnny, is this true?
As you know by now, I like to surf the internet to find the strange and unusual. I do this in the name of the podcast, but the truth is, I would do it anyway, even if there was no podcast. What you're about to hear is...
Johnny, is this true?
I will tell you a story and then ask the question, did I make it up or is it true? Your job is to decide. Let's get started.
Johnny, is this true?
This time on Johnny, Is It True? We continue with the Shadow theme. I will make a statement about our crime fighter, and your job is to decide of whether it's true or not. The Shadow is that time-tested radio show that took the world by storm and continues to do so even today. Let's see how well you know our historic crime fighter. Story 1. Pulp magazine publisher Street and Smith decided that instead of advertising their magazines on newsstands, they would try something new: radio. In 1930, they sponsored a weekly show called the Detective Story Hour, which featured adaptations of mystery stories from their magazine of the same name. The shows were first announced, then later narrated by a strange and shadowy figure named, appropriately, the shadow. Is this how our crime fighter got his start, or did I just make it up? That is a true origin story. Much to Street and Smith's amazement, it was the narrator that became more popular than the show. Audiences were requesting that tales be written for him and forget about all that other stuff. True story. Story 2. We all know that the shadow used the power to cloud men's minds so they couldn't see him. But originally, the pulp novel character used stealth, a pair of 45s, and an occasional magic trick to solve his crimes. That can't be right, can it? It is correct. There were many differences between the radio version and the shadow of pulp mags. The shadow was stronger, faster, and smarter in the magazines. However, on the radio side, they wanted to make a character that fits the man-about-town routine that was so popular at the time. So, the shadow was transformed into what people wanted the most. The rest, actually, was history. Story 3. The shadow's main sidekick for the radio series was, of course, Margot Lane. But was this his only sidekick? Nope, there was one other. He had a sentient parrot that he had become friends with while training in the Orient. His name was Cordona. Now, can you believe it? I wouldn't if I were you. I sort of made that one up. Although there is a Cordona in the series, but to call Inspector Cordona a parrot would be a big mistake. You see, he was a no-nonsense guy who didn't take much flack before reaching out and touching someone, if you know what I mean. Story 4. Speaking of sidekicks, the Shadow did have another one. Or did he? Do you think that Lamont Cranston would hang with a guy called Shrevey? He did, actually. Mo Shrevey Shrevnitz is a cab driver from the Bronx who once ran his own taxi service. When some thugs intended to kill him and take his taxi cab, the Shadow saved him. He was then later asked to join the Shadow's network of agents. He accepted and became the personal cab driver for the organization. How about that? That's it for this edition of Johnny Is It True? It was brought to you by Gladys Goodies. Gladys Goodies are great treats for your dogs and cats alike. They are 100% natural and are a nutrient-rich treat that pets love to eat. You can get these and some really cool swag for your dog and cat at GladysGoodies.com. And please don't forget to use our promo code RONS, that's RONS, to get a 20% discount on all of your purchases. That website again is GladysGoodies.com. That is episode number 435. These are the people that made it happen: Keith Clark, Jeff Owen, Elizabeth Butler, Isaac Mullins, and Martin Hillcrest. Thank you, guys. If you want to follow the podcast or the blog, just head to ronsamazingstories.com. There you will find an amazing number of links that should fit every need. Do you want to help the show? The best thing you can do is to tell your friends about it, and please leave reviews or feedback wherever you listen. Pressing that share button or follow button helps us to grow. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come again to find out what are Ron's amazing stories.